Hey wizards, how's it going? If you're just arriving here at the Leaky Cauldron, then don't be a muggle. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you can stay up to date with everything that's going on here.
And remember, you can become a member of the channel and get access to exclusive benefits, like badges that appear next to your name and emojis for you to use in the comments. For example, Dumbledore seems to know everything. He just seems to know everything that's going on. Like, for example, knowing that Voldemort killed the Potters and Harry survived, and immediately putting a plan into action to get Harry out of there. Or how he accidentally arrived at the Ministry of Magic hearing 3 hours early after they changed Harry's hearing time and place in Order of the Phoenix. The fact is that there are many means of communication in the wizarding world, and we see them throughout the entire story. There are owls that deliver letters, two-way mirrors, the Flu Network, Patronuses, books with photos, skull tattoos on the Death Eater's arms, not to mention the portraits that can enter and leave their frames, carrying information back and forth. Some of these methods seem to be quite effective, but others can be easily intercepted. So, did Dumbledore have a secret way of communicating that no one knew about? That would be the key to Dumbledore's secret for knowing so many things. Well, there's a theory about this that's really old, but it has started circulating again on the internet recently. Maybe the fans who followed the book releases and who used to visit fan sites back in 2005, 2006 will remember.
I got this Instagram post from several people
Regarding this theory about Dumbledore using the chocolate frog cards as a communication network, let's first understand what this theory says. Basically, it argues that the chocolate frog cards are a very good means for Dumbledore. He could spy and find out things that are happening, since there could be several cards of him spread all over the world, and he just moves from one card to another, and that way, he can learn things. And the theory reinforces this possibility by using Bill's statement, when he says that Dumbledore didn't care about losing the big titles he had, but he did care about losing his card. From the chocolate frog, that he would be removed from the cards. When Harry opens a chocolate frog for the first time in his life, it's Dumbledore's card that he gets, and it disappears right away. When Harry is surprised, Ron says he couldn't wait all day. The question is, where did the Dumbledore from the card go? Did he go to his portrait at Hogwarts to say that everything was fine, and that Harry had boarded and everything was okay? Could the cards work that way? The theory basically uses how the portraits work and applies it to the cards. However, the chocolate frog cards have photos of the wizards, not paintings. And maybe you're wondering what the difference is between portraits and photos. They're basically the same, but there's a difference in the wizarding world, and in the real world too, right? A painting is made by hand, a photo is developed. But anyway, besides that difference, their magical function is also different. Harry opened the chocolate frog and pulled it out. The card showed the face of a man, wearing half-moon glasses, with a long, crooked nose, flowing silver hair, a beard, and a mustache.
Beneath the portrait was the name Alvo Dumbledore.
I know I just said it's not a portrait, but that's because this is the excerpt from the Portuguese version of the book, which was translated as retrato. But in the original language, it says picture. And when they're referring to a portrait in Harry Potter, they use the term portrait, not picture. So here it's actually referring to a photo. And what is this difference? Well, basically portraits are painted by someone and animated with a spell, so the portrait carries a bit of the personality of the person portrayed.
Including the portraits of the Hogwarts headmasters.
They live alongside the headmasters themselves and are taught by the headmaster, the real person, so that they can pass on teachings and give advice to future headmasters. Besides that, the portraits can leave their frames and go to other portraits, but only to portraits where they were painted. They can't go to frames that aren't their own portraits. While wizard photos move, when they are developed with the right potion, they gain movement. But it's all very limited. The photos don't talk. They can't leave the frame, go to another frame. They can even hide inside the frame, but they can't leave. So, there are some limitations. For the photos, Harry examined, confused. The photo that Colin was waving under his nose in a black and white photo. A moving Lockhart was forcefully pulling an arm Harry recognized as his. He was pleased to see that his photographic self was bravely resisting and refusing to be dragged into the photo. As Harry watched, Lockhart gave up and collapsed, panting, against the white edge of the photo. This excerpt from Chamber of Secrets shows the photo's limitation in practice. Harry's photographic self isn't a conscious thing. He's not aware of what his photographic self is doing. His photographic self just behaves. How he was feeling at the time. Harry didn't want the photo taken and felt uncomfortable, so his photographic self appears as if he's trying to hide or escape.
It's like when we see the Weasleys' photo in Egypt. They're truly happy because they were happy then.
But if the chocolate frog card has a photo and not a portrait, how does the wizard on the card leave and go somewhere else? Do these cards behave more like portraits, even though they're photos? Is there some kind of specific enchantment? And then, that would explain why Dumbledore knows so much, how he knows what's happening so quickly.
Actually, the Super Carlinhos Brothers channel made a video about this theory, and they highlighted some points that I'll bring up here as well. And then I'll explain a bit about how this theory was viewed at the time and how it unfolded.
Over at Super Carlinhos Brothers, they emphasized that it was brilliant because it would really fit with Dumbledore, since he always used candy names as passwords, like Lemon Drop, Fizzing Whizbees, Cockroach Clusters, Cockroach, and what is it? Fizzing Whizbees.
Dumbledore often used this type of password, even early on. In the first book, he suggests Chubbered Lemon, right?
Lemon drops to Minerva McGonagall were mistranslated as lemon ice cream in the Portuguese version, but they're not ice cream. That would be brilliant because it would be a counterpoint to Voldemort himself, who chooses a password that's completely predictable, right? Considering it's Voldemort.
Dumbledore himself gets to the cave and says, "It needs a payment blood," which is very obvious, very much Voldemort's style. But Dumbledore's passwords, who is an extremely powerful wizard, considered the most powerful wizard of his time.
His enemies would never guess his passwords were candy names, especially Voldemort, who hates anything he sees as weak. So Dumbledore using those little things is clever, right?
That's the point that Super Carlinhos Brothers made while talking about the theory.
Besides that, they also pointed out that it's very similar to the system we see in Fantastic Beasts with Flamel, using that book that Dumbledore has.
Also, he communicates through people's photos. Flamel talks to Eulalie Rix, for example, using a photo book. It's like an address book.
There, with the wizard's photos, they can communicate, leave the frame and come back. And those aren't portraits, they're regular photos. So it's actually a pretty clever way to communicate.
Definitely. It's a really cool theory, but there are a few points. Dumbledore isn't the only one on the chocolate frog cards. There are several other wizards there too.
And what if they wanted to use that too? And in the Super Carlinhos Brothers video, they pointed out that in the first book, a few cards are mentioned, right?
Among them are Morgana, Le Fay, Angus of Woodcroft, Albrecht, Grunion, Circe, Paracelsus, Cleogena, Merlin, Cornelius, Agrippa, and Dumbledore. Out of all of them, only Dumbledore was alive at the time.
Those are the only cards mentioned in the book. Later, games were released, and J.K. Rowling created hundreds more cards. They're canon and exist, and the theory ended up ignoring that, right? They ended up ignoring that in the theory. But this theory about the chocolate frogs being a spy network.
It's not new. It's been around for nearly 20 years. Before the last book came out, people discussed this possibility a lot.
But this theory kind of lost strength after the release of Deathly Hallows, where we see Shacklebolt using the Patronus as a means of communication. And this theory was so strong at the time that it even reached J.K. Rowling, and she said the following on her website: "This is such a good idea that I was unsure whether I should reject it." However, a chocolate frog card or any object that needed to be remembered and carried around would always be vulnerable to loss, destruction, or cheating. The Order communicates in a way that only requires a wand. You saw the Order's method of communication even before you knew the Order existed, and it was used by a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Here, she's referring to Dumbledore using the Patronus as a means of communication in Goblet of Fire. So it's actually a very good theory, but it was disproven. And I have a few points I'd like to add to show that this theory is very good, but it has some flaws that break it. Alright then, portraits and photos work differently. But later, some photos act like portraits, as seen in Crimes of Grindelwald, right?
In the movie where they take the book, they talk, right?
But the point about Dumbledore caring about losing the cards doesn't make sense, like, oh, this is because it's some kind of spy network.
Because if he was removed from the cards, if they stopped making cards with Dumbledore on them, fine, they would just stop making them.
But the ones that already exist would still exist. They would still be in people's homes.
So, I believe that the magic in the cards is different from the photos and portraits.
It's not a photo as limited as the ones taken there, developed with a specific potion, and it's also not quite like a portrait, animated by a spell. It's a specific enchantment that must be on the card, which allows the wizards to leave, go from one card to another, but they don't speak, don't communicate, or anything like that. In the end, Dumbledore knows things, like, for example, at the Ministry of Magic when he arrives. Before, I've even seen a theory saying that he used a time turner and got there earlier.
It's really very simple. He knew what was happening. He saw that the Ministry was trying to expel Harry, and it was even him who made Harry have that hearing. The Ministry of Magic expels Harry.
When he uses the Patronus, a letter arrives saying that he was expelled, and then another letter comes from Mr. Weasley telling Harry not to do anything, that he hadn't been expelled, that Dumbledore was taking care of it, and then Dumbledore goes to the Ministry immediately.
And he reminds Fuji that no student can be expelled without a formal hearing. Got it?
So he gets a hearing for Harry, following the law and all, so he knew these things could happen. The Ministry was in such a hurry to silence Harry that he understands, well, they can mess things up, change the hearing, time or place. That's why he arrives early. It makes it seem like Dumbledore knows everything, right? He's usually one step ahead. Because he reads people very well, he can figure people out, he's very analytical. That's why it's not any trick or secret way of communicating. Anyway, it's a really good theory. I like it a lot. I think if it were incorporated into the story somehow, if it were developed and refined, it could work perfectly within the story. But that's not the case. It's just a theory. Had you ever heard of this theory before? Do you remember it from back then, around 2005, 2006? I have a friend who I'm sure will remember, and that's Bia. Bia has been around forever, since back then. She will definitely remember this theory. By the way, big hugs to you, Bia.
And tell me here, what do you think about this theory? Do you think it's cool? Do you think it would work? Do you think it would be nice if it were part of the story? Leave a comment down here. I'll see you in the next episode of The Leaky Cauldron, and until then, mischief managed.